in geometry. For the following example, if you didn't know much about the XY coordinate plane, you could find the distance between X and Y using what you know about geometry. How would you find the distance? Well, you learned a theorem called the Pythagorean theorem that allowed you to find the distance as long as you were using a right triangle. So what we would do is we'd create a right triangle with this picture, and we want to make sure that XY is the hypotenuse. So how would I create the right triangle? I have to show the distance up and down between X and Y, and the distance side to side. So really, I would say the horizontal distance between X and Y. And then that would create the right triangle. Ooh, I don't know what just happened there. And then I could use that to evaluate the distance between X and Y. Now, how would you calculate the distance up and down? What would you guys do? In units, what would you do to determine how big this is up and down? I would count it. That's what I do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 units. You could have the triangle flipped, yeah. And then side to side, how many units is this? 1, 2, 3, 3 units. And do you guys remember the Pythagorean theorem? It's probably important that we remember it. Yes, Katie? Yes, do you want to bring up your, oh, I had a student return it and I don't know where they put it. Let's see if it's in here. Oh, here's one. Do you mind? Yeah, just, okay, so the Pythagorean theorem, I heard some of you say a squared plus b squared equals c squared. There are perfect triples. We'll talk about those. You might see this as one of them, but let me remind you of that after we solve it, okay? So C, what does C represent in the right triangle? Hypotenuse. So if you actually had Miss Gregerson, oh, that's a weird pen, she would say the leg squared plus the leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if I'm looking at this right triangle, which one's the hypotenuse? The longer one. The longer one. So the length between X and Y, right? So I would say if I'm solving for the length of XY, that's the one I'd put in for the hypotenuse. So using this formula, I know that this is going to equal XY squared. The length of one leg we counted was 3 units. So I know that 3 squared plus the length of the other leg was 4 units. So I know 4 squared will equal the length of XY squared. Now let's just solve this. What is 3 squared equal to? 9. What's 4 squared? 16. So I know 9 plus 16 equals XY squared. What is 9 plus 16? 25. And you guys know we did a lot of this in algebra 2. What does a square? Square root. So the length of XY is going to equal the square root of 25. What's that? 5. So we have 3, 4, and the hypotenuse. Yes, Caroline, remember that is a triple. And if you have it memorized, you can kind of avoid all that work. But for right now, I want to use that work because it'll help us derive the distance formula. Now, what you did is you found the distance between point X and point Y. Let's go ahead and label the points X and Y and see really kind of what do we see happening in the numbers that we have shown. So if I labeled point X, and I'm going to do these colors on purpose, do you guys remember how to identify points on the XY coordinate plane? Where do you start from? Like if I'm telling you to label point X. Yep, you start from the origin, and then you would go in the X direction. So the X coordinate of this is 1. And then you would go in the Y direction. So it's right 1, up 2. So the Y coordinate is 2. And that's point X. Now, looking at point Y, we would do the same thing. Start from the origin. We would go right 1, 2, 3, 4. So the X coordinate of point Y is 4. And the Y coordinate would be, let's see, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 4, 6. Now, if I said, hey, you cannot count these units, you have to show me using the numbers of X and Y, how long this length is. Let me highlight the numbers I want you to focus on. If I'm asking you what is this distance here, you can actually look at just the x values, 1 and 4. And you would be able to determine how many units that piece is. What would you do with the numbers 4 and 1 to determine that this was 3? Subtract. Awesome. You would just do 4 minus 1. In a similar fashion, you could do the same thing for the vertical distance, the up and down. You could look at just the y values, 6 and 2. And if I said you can't count the units, I want you to use the actual numbers of points x and y. Turn to your partner and tell them, what would you do with 6 and 2 to determine this height? You guys know? You're on mute. I'm hoping you're saying subtract, like your classmates are saying. 6 minus 2. Hopefully you said yes. All right, guys, I heard you say 6 minus 2, and that would tell you that this is 4 units, right? Okay, what if I said I want to use this process to identify the distance between any points, x and y? What I'd like you to do is just call this point x, call that your first point, your x1, y1. And call this your second point, your x2, y2. You guys told me that this distance, really the left to right distance or the horizontal distance, could be found by taking 4 minus 1. I want you to use this picture, and now let's jump to the next picture. We're going to use what we just did and apply it to any generic coordinates. So we're calling point x just an x1, y1, and point y, x2, y2. We're going to identify the distance, but I want you to use the following questions to guide us through the process. So number 1, it says, in the right triangle drawn for you, what is the length of xz? So there's no units now drawn for you, but you do know this x coordinate we could call x1, and this x coordinate we could call x2. How could I show, or how could I represent this distance between x and z using x2 and x1? On your own, write it down, see what you, if you need help, look back at the previous picture. All right, for a road to excellence, raise your hand if you can tell me, what did you write down for the length of xz? Ooh, good, lots of hands. Mario? Nice. You could actually write it like that. I'm just going to use it to match the picture. In the picture, we did 4 minus 1, so that would be x2 minus x1. But actually, Mario, your way would work just as well. Just so that it matches the picture, I'm just going to call it x2 minus x1. But she's right. Take the difference of the x coordinates. So go ahead and write that, x2 minus x1. Okay, in the same way, if I was to write the distance up and down using those coordinates, I would now want to use the y's. What could I do with y2 and y1 to represent this distance here? Caleb?
Y2 minus Y1.
Nice. Y2 minus y1. So go ahead and answer the second question in that way. In the right triangle drawn for you, what is the length of yz? Y2 minus y1. Okay, so Caleb gave us how to show the distance of one leg. Mario gave us how to show the distance of another leg. So now we can use this to represent the distance of the hypotenuse, xy. So that's what we would do in number 3. It says, now write the Pythagorean theorem for this triangle. Quick reminder, the Pythagorean theorem is the leg squared plus the leg squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. And so now I'm going to use these generic situations. One leg is shown with y2 minus y1 squared. The other leg is shown by using x2 minus x1 squared. And then the hypotenuse, we'll call that the length of xy squared. Now, if I'm solving for the length of xy, what undoes a square? Square root. So the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared is going to equal the length of xy. And just so we know what xy represents the distance between point x and point y. So let's go ahead and let's write that down. This here represents the distance between point x, which was shown with any generic coordinate, x1, y1, and point y, which was shown with any generic coordinate, x2, y2.
X1 comma?
Yeah, x1 comma y1. So what you actually just found is the distance formula. The distance between 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2 is what you just showed. The distance is equal to the square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus x2 minus x1 squared. It doesn't matter if the x's are first or the y's are first because the addition is commutative. Zinnia. This one? Okay, so here's the thing. If you don't like formulas, you actually can always create a right triangle like we did at the beginning and use the Pythagorean theorem to find the distance between 2 points. If you prefer to just know a formula and plug in values, you can do that instead. Okay, in the same way that we just derived, so we just made the distance formula, we're going to take a look at how is the midpoint formula derived. So let me ask you a few leading questions. If I ask you to find the middle number between 12 and 28, on your own, just write the answer. What would be the middle number between 12 and 28? I'm going to walk around. I just want to see how you think about it. Because a lot of people think about it in different ways. All right, guys. I saw people think about this in different ways, but no matter which way you thought about it, you should have an answer of 20. The middle number between 12 and 28 is 20. Now, I want to ask Weston, how did you think about it? You added them and divided them by 2. So you took the average. You said 40 divided by 2 will give me that middle number, which is 20. Awesome. I saw some people see that there were 16 units between 12 and 28. So they just added 8 to 20 and they found the middle number. That works too. You just have to know how to find the middle. Okay, what if I ask you the same question, but now I'm asking you to find the middle number between 9 and 20? You want to be able to use your method to find the middle number. I actually like Weston's way because if I tried to calculate the distance between these two, I would have to take into account a half of a unit. So I actually would just add 9 and 20 and then divide it by 2. What's 29 divided by 2? 14.5. Now, if you thought of it a different way, do you see how this still works? You could add those two and take half to find the middle. When you are finding the midpoint, that's essentially what you're doing. All you're doing is finding an average. You're finding the middle between two x's and the middle between two y's. Let's take a look at these 2 points and think through just the x values and then the y values. So looking at these 2 points, I didn't give you the y coordinate, but I told you that the x is 1 and 3. What would be the middle x between 1 and 3? 1.5 would actually be right here. So if you're looking at like distance wise, if you want to see what's the middle between 1 and 3, yeah, there you go. It's 2. So you'd have to really look. There's 1 unit here and 1 unit here. So that middle number is 2. But if you don't want to think distance, could you have used Weston's way and just said 1 plus 3 and divided by 2? What's 4 divided by 2? 2. So either way that you think about it, you should find that middle x to be 2. Now, what if I give you the y coordinates of these points? And I tell you that the y coordinate is 2 and 5. If you're a visual person, you actually could just look along the y-axis, 2 and 5. What would be the middle between 2 and 5? 3.5. You would look in between, it would be right here. And that's where the y coordinate would line up. Now, if you instead want to just find the average, just 2 plus 5 divided by 2 tells you that that should be 3.5. So that's all you're doing with a midpoint. So now what would be the midpoint of this line? We know that this x coordinate is 1, this x coordinate is 3. Just put those pieces together. The middle x is 2, and the middle y is 3.5. So essentially, that's what you have to do for any coordinates on the xy coordinate plane. If you know 1 point and another point, to find the middle x, you could just find the average x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and that will tell you the x. And to find the y, you would do y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And that's your midpoint formula. So now state the midpoint formula here. To find the x, you just average the x's. And to find the y, you just average the y's. If you prefer a different way to find the middle, that's fine. You just have to find the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's. All right, those are our 2 formulas. So now we're just going to practice applying them. But you do have to be able to label points on the xy coordinate plane. So let's make sure we remember, starting with the first application question, number 1, let's label the points A through H. So starting at point A. Do you guys remember how to label points on the xy axis? Where do you have to start? The origin, good. And then from the origin, if I'm going to A, I have to go in the x direction first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the x coordinate is 5, and then up 1. So coordinate A has location 5, 1. Point B, start from the origin. We have to go right 1. So our x coordinate is 1, up 2. So B is at 1, 2. If I look at point C, now I have to go left 2. So that's at -2 would be the x coordinate. And then up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the y direction. So -2, 6 would be point C. Point D, starting from the origin, I have to go left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So -6 would be the x coordinate, and then up to -6, 2 would be point D. Okay, we need to find points E, F, G, and H. If you could turn to your group, and the person whose birthday is coming up closest to today, you turn to your partner and tell them, what would point E be at? And then finish these together. Oh no, we lost Haley. Olivia, what is your birthday? I feel like I should know this. Oh no, I can't hear you. Is this chat? Is this what you're telling me? Oh, dogs are barking. Okay, August 20th. Mine's July 16th. Shucks, I win. Okay, so point E is at -4, -1. Point F is at -2, comma 0. Point G is at -1, -3. And point H is at 2, -2. Do you agree, Olivia?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hopefully, yes. Let's see your chat. Yep, got it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, check your points. The trickiest one I would say is point F. Check to see that point F is at -2, 0, because you didn't go up and down any direction. So your Y is 0. All right, now let's apply what we've learned. Find the distance between point C and D. If you are a visual person, you could draw a triangle and see how far is it up and down and how far is it left and right, and do the Pythagorean theorem. If you're a formula person, you would just use those 2 points. So point C is at not point 0. Point C is at -2, 6. Point D is at -6, 2. And you would call one point, doesn't matter which one, but you have to call it x1, y1 because it's your first point. And the second point, you would call x2, y2. And because we just wrote down the distance formula and we do have to commit it to memory, I'll write it again. The square root of y2 minus y1 squared plus quantity x2 minus x1 squared. And now I would plug and chug if I like using a formula, which I'll be honest, I do. So I'll put that in and I would have 2 is my second y coordinate, 6 is my first. So 2 minus 6 squared plus, and then -6 is my second x coordinate, -2 is my first x coordinate squared. What is 2 minus 6? -4. So I have -4 squared plus. What happens when you minus a negative? Positive. So what's -6 plus 2? -4. And then what is -4 squared? 16. So I have square root of 16 plus 16. What is 16 plus 16? 32. Do we know how to simplify the square root of 32? Let's do some final review. Do you guys want to use the factoring tree or the perfect squares method? I heard trees. All right, 32, I'll do it using both methods. If you're a perfect square, 16 is the perfect square that goes into it because 4 times 4. If you're a factoring person, 2 of the same numbers would be 4. So our answer is 4 root 2. All right, on to the next one. Find the distance between points C and B. So C has the location -2, 6. B has the location 1, 2. On your own, see if you can find the distance. I want to see if you guys are drawing triangles or using the formula, just kind of what's the preferred way. Okay, go ahead and check when you're finished. If you were using the formula, which I saw a lot of people doing, you just need to make sure whichever point you call your first point, that has to go with x1 and y1. And whatever point you call your second point, x2 has to go with y2. And then you plug it in, you should get an answer of 5. Some people I saw creating a triangle, they had units of 3 and 4, and they saw the hypotenuse was 5. That would work too. Any questions on that? All right, the next formula we learned was the midpoint. So let's make sure we know how to use that. Find the midpoint between points F and H. If you really are a visual person, you could just look at what's the middle between the x's, between points F and H. And I drew that in the wrong spot because H is actually right there. And what's the middle between the y's, between points F and H? But since we use the formula, I'm going to go ahead and show how would we use that formula. So point F is at the location -2, 0. Point H is at the location 2, -2. And using the formula, the midpoint formula is add the x's together and find the average. So divide it by 2. Add the y's together, find the average. So divide it by 2. So we'd have to call one of those points our first point, the other point our second point, and we would plug it in. So we'd have -2 plus 2 divided by 2, 0 plus -2 divided by 2. What's -2 plus 2? 0. What's 0 divided by 2? 0, good. 0 plus -2 would be -2. What's -2 divided by 2? -1. So our midpoint is 0, -1. All right, then find the midpoint between E and C. C, again, has the point -2, 6. If I'm finding point E is at -4, -1. On your own, find the midpoint between points E and C. All right, I got to throw in a challenge question. This was not that challenging. I give you the midpoints and I give you an endpoint. Can you work to find the missing point? And when I say I got it from your textbook. So I in your textbook. I think a lot of us really like to see a picture to help us understand the situation. It says point A is at 2, 3. So make sure you know that that would be like right here. A is at 2, 3. Point M is your midpoint. That's at 4, 10. So make sure you know where would that be. 7, 8, 9, 10. Right here. You guys know from geometry, what does it mean to be in the exact middle? It means whatever distance is here has to be the same distance over here. Do you guys remember what markings we could show to like show up? How could I mark up my diagram to show that? Yeah, tick marks. Awesome. Okay, you have point A. You're missing point B. It's your second coordinate, your x2, y2. I will show you that you have your first coordinate. You have your x1, y1. This one, you know the average. You know the middle is 4 for the x's, and you know the average of the y's. You know the middle is 10. So on your own, see if you can determine what's that second point. And I've seen people do it today all over the place in different ways. So I just want to see how you guys think. Can you determine that missing point? Okay. I've seen some of my more visual people get this pretty quickly, and some of my more algebraic people getting this almost just as fast. Weston, can you tell me how you got the answer?
I did 4 minus 2,
Okay,
which is 2, and then I did 10 minus 3, which is 7. And then I
Okay.
did 4 plus 2, and 10 plus 7.
Okay.
which is 6, 7.
nice. So Weston's noticing that the distance from 2 to 4 is 2 units. So he said, since it's a midpoint, it has to be the same way. He said 4 plus 2 then, like if you think in the x direction, would have to be 6. And then in the y direction, he said from 3 to 10 would be 7 units. Or you could look at it in this way, 7. So then he said 10 add 7 would give you 17. And so we said the answer has to be 617. He's correct. 617 would work. Michaela, you did the same thing, right?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking if 4 is the middle, then it's,
It has to be the middle between 2 and 6.
yeah, like what divided by 2.
Oh, nice. And then you thought the same for 17?
So
And
it has
then-
to be 8.
Nice.
And then you figure out like 2 plus what divided by 2. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And I saw Caleb and I saw Sophie, and sorry, I didn't get to walk around to everyone, but they said they know the middle. X1 plus X2 divided by 2 is going to give you the middle X, 4. And Y1 plus Y2 divided by 2, they know the middle. The middle Y has to be 10. We know this point is our X1. Oops, that was supposed to be a highlighter. Ah. We know that this point is 2 and 3, so we can put that in for X1 and Y1. So if you are more of a formula person, you would say 2 plus the second X coordinate divided by 2 has to equal 4. And 3, I can't change colors, plus the second Y coordinate divided by 2 has to equal 1. And you would just solve, kind of go backwards. What undoes division? Multiplication. So we'd multiply by 2, and that would cancel. And we'd have 2 plus the second X coordinate has to equal 8. So subtract 2, and you'd get the second X coordinate has to equal 6. In a similar fashion, multiply this by 2. What was that, 10? Multiply that by 2. And you get 3 plus your second Y coordinate has to equal 20. So subtract 3, and you would get that second Y coordinate has to equal 17. No matter which way you prefer, you do have to know that that missing coordinate would be at 617. All right, guys, your homework is from 1-1. I do have your tests. We have about 2 minutes. I will try to walk around and show you them as quickly as I can. Or if I didn't get to you and you want to see your test, just come see me. But let me stop this. No.